In my recent Audacity video, I talked about the new CLA or Contributor License Agreement they introduced in their project, and some of the people in the comment section for that didn't understand how the CLA gave the owners of the project so much power over what they could do, where they could go and take GPL v2 code and make it proprietary tomorrow, and there is nothing you could do about it. A contributor license agreement is effectively an extra set of terms you have to agree to over the terms of the license of the actual project before you're actually allowed to submit any code to a project that makes use of one. Now, because of things like what I said before, they are highly controversial. The way that signing is handled is also very different on a project-by-project basis. Some of them will do it through an email list. I know there are some that use Google Forms. Why they use Google Forms, I don't know. Others just get you to sign when you actually submit it on Git. To understand how a CLA actually works, we need to have a basic understanding of how code licenses work as well. Now, normally when you submit code to a project, that code is now going to be licensed under the terms of that project's license. The amount of protections you as the developer and the maintainers of the project actually get very much depend on the license actually being used. So things like variants of the BSD license allow for proprietary use, whereas GPL or other very strong free licenses don't allow you to do that. And with these GPL type licenses, you can't just go and relicense the codebase at will. So you can't take a GPL v2 project and then go relicense it under BSD, for example. You can go and do that, but what it requires is getting permission from the contributors of the project. So everyone who has contributed to the project and has code that is still being used has to be contacted and asked if this is allowed to happen. This puts the maintainers and the contributors on equal footing. So the maintainers can't go and decide, okay, we've had this entire product being built up. We no longer care about it being free software, though. We're now going to go and take it proprietary and pretend like all of that stuff never happened. By having it under a license like GPL v2, GPL v3, that cannot be done. The only way for that to happen without every contributor signing off on this license change is by rewriting the parts that weren't actually signed off on. So in the case of Audacity, I think 90% of the code base is covered by the CLA, so they can go and rewrite that last 10% and no longer have to worry about it. Not all CLAs are as bad as each other, and generally they're used for two purposes. Firstly, I mentioned this one earlier, affording the project more rights than what their software license actually gives them, and the second one is a far more legitimate usage. That is putting the contributors in a situation where they have signed a legally binding contract saying they actually own the code they are submitting. But as we'll see a bit later, this isn't something you actually need a CLA for. So one generally okay CLA is the one used by the Apache Software Foundation, because this one doesn't actually allow for relicensing. However, in the case of Audacity, the reason why its CLA is so dangerous is because of one very simple phrase, and if you ever see this phrase, run away straight away, never sign that CLA. Go and fork the project if you really want to keep working on it, but do not submit code to that project. And that is the ability to use the contributions in any way. In any way is a very dangerous legal phrase because it gives you the ability to do literally anything. You might be thinking, okay, but how does that circumvent the GPL? The project maintainers still have to go and respect the license of their project. Well, they don't actually have to do that. Let's say you go and start up a project right now, and you go and license it under GPL v3, and you never accept any contributions from anyone else. And let's say this project becomes really popular, has 10,000 stars on GitHub, everyone loves it. And you decide, okay, I want to go and make this proprietary. Now, normally, you wouldn't be able to do that, but you are the one contributor, so you are the only person that needs to actually give permission to change that license. This is effectively what the CLA is doing. It's effectively making the owners of Audacity the one contributor. In any way is an incredibly dangerous term and should be avoided at all costs, but you don't need something like that to actually do relicensing with a CLA. So you could have a term in your CLA that's far more restrictive. It could be something like, okay, we can relicense the project, but it has to be a GPL derivative or a license approved by the FSF. In that case, the codebase could never go proprietary because you're limiting the pool of licenses you can actually pick from. And there are legitimate reasons to actually go from, say, GPL v2 to GPL v3. Some projects, because of the way they are licensed, aren't actually compatible with certain versions of GPL, so you might want to go to a different version to actually do that. Or let's say you want to go and release your software on the Apple Store. GPL v2 and GPL v3 aren't actually compatible with those stores, so you might want to go and license it under something like LGPL, which actually is compatible. So the big problem with this is you get the benefits of your software actually being open source. So you get the community contributions because people are going to commit, assuming the code is going to stay under that license or at least stay open source, and you get the goodwill from the FOSS world in the form of donations and good press from people like me and plenty of other people out there. But normally when you make something free software, it is a commitment to the community, and you waiver exclusive rights to that code for the good of the community. But by having a CLA there, it provides you with an exit hatch. And this is why you see CLAs typically being used when there are corporate interests attached to a project. One easy example being Golang, which is developed by Google. That actually has a CLA that you're required to sign before you submit any code. So basically, you can let the community go and build a product for you and then just pull the rug out from under them, and they don't really have anything they can do about it. Being FOSS doesn't mean the project has to be non-commercial, and there is an article on the GNU website, which I'll link in the description down below, which actually goes over this. But a lot of companies aren't really used to the limited amount of control you actually get over the code base when it is FOSS. So they want to have some way to circumvent that, and that's how you see CLAs actually being used. Now, all of this doesn't mean that a project maintainer shouldn't be worrying about legitimate ownership concerns of the code being submitted. So they should be worrying about whether the code submitted is stolen code and licensed under some incompatible license, and they should be worrying about whether the person actually submitting code has some sort of contract with their employer where any code written by that person is owned by the employer, even outside of work hours, which is pretty crazy that some employers do that, but that actually is a thing that exists. However, this problem was dealt with by the Linux Foundation about 17 years ago by creating something known as the DCO, or the Developer Certificate of Origin, where basically you take the ownership part of the CLA and you have it in its own separate contract, and whenever someone submits code to your project, you just have them certify that they are the owner. You don't have any extra rights being afforded the project. You don't have copyright licenses or patent licenses, or you can use the code in any way. No, it is just saying, I own this code, and I am allowed to submit it. Being by the Linux Foundation, this is obviously something used by the Linux kernel. So when you submit code to that, you just have to certify, hey, I'm the owner, and we're good to go. And a bunch of other projects like the Eclipse Foundation, OpenSearch by Amazon, Docker, GitLab, they all use this, and countless other projects. And if you want to certify your ownership, this is basically all you need. Now, one point I want to bring up that I know if I don't, someone else is going to mention is, okay, great point about the CLAs, but I trust the maintainers of X project. I don't think they're ever going to go and take that project proprietary. And if those people are to be trusted, hey, they might never go and take it proprietary. They might go from GPL v2 to GPL v3, then one day go up to GPL v4 and keep doing that into the future. I propose a problem with this though. What if that project ever gets so popular and the maintainers decide, okay, we're going to go and sell it to some corporation, which did happen with MuseScore. And when MuseScore started, it already had a CLA. Now that a company has acquired that project and it already had a CLA, they can go and do whatever they want with it. So no longer are the maintainers that you trusted actually running the project. This is the problem with a CLA. If you sign a CLA, you are signing away the future of that project. Before I go, I just want to mention that this video is heavily inspired by two articles by Drew DeVault. Firstly, don't sign a CLA, and the second one is the Developer Certificate of Origin is a great alternative to a CLA. I highly recommend going and reading these articles for yourself. They are very good articles. Even though I disagree with a lot of the stuff that Drew DeVault writes in other articles, I think these are definitely worth reading. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of CLAs, and will you ever actually go and sign a CLA to submit code to a project? Or would you much rather just go and fork the project and actually make it something that is always going to be free software? Let me know in the comment section down below. So I think that's going to be basically everything for me, and before I go, I would like to thank my supporters. So a special thank you to Joachim Donald, Logan, Michael, Andre, Nathan, David, Carl, Mitchell, Will, Brennan, Chica Bento, Jamie, Joseph, Josh, Peter D, Stephen Tees through, Tony Tushar, and all of my $2 supporters. If you'd like to support work, there are links down below to my Patreon, subscribe, start, leave a all that sort of stuff. I've got my podcast, Tech Over Tea, available basically anywhere. I've got a live streaming channel called Brody Robertson Plays, where I play games twice a week, and this channel is available over on Odyssey. So that's going to be everything for me, and I'm out.